Thank you, Sarah. I'm just going to share my screen. Everything okay? Can we see that? Perfect. All right, so good morning, everyone, and thank you to Sarah and Wayne for providing us with this opportunity to present some of our research with all of you today. I also want to thank Regan for helping to organize this meeting, and thank you to everyone who has come out to listen to our presentations today. So the project that I will be speaking to you all about for the next little while looks at examining the need, capacity, and barriers to accessing food, animal, veterinary services in underserviced areas of rural Ontario. My name is Minerva, and I'm a graduate research assistant working with Professor Sara Epp on this project since September of 2020. I've just completed my Master's of Science in Rural Planning and Development program at the University of Guelph. During today's presentation, I will walk you through the research project, starting with some background information about the issues and objectives, followed by an overview of some of the key findings and from each of the surveyed groups, including veterinarian, producers, and student perspectives. I will then provide some additional information from the student focus groups, which is our most recent method of data collection. And we'll end off by discussing some of the key takeaways from the project and what you can expect in the coming months as the project has wrapped up completion. Veterinary capacity in rural and remote communities is a long-standing problem that has continuously affected livestock producers and veterinarians, not only in Northern Ontario, but in various other regions across the country and internationally. Access to consistent and reliable veterinary services is critical for animal health and welfare, as well as food safety. Livestock farms need reliable access to veterinary services in order to ensure optimal health and welfare of their animals. However, certain regions of Ontario have few veterinary clinics, making it difficult for operations in these areas to receive routine or emergency services in a timely manner. Veterinary care is not consistent across the province, with a special concern for Northern Ontario, which is estimated to be particularly underserved. The Government of Ontario has expressed an interest in expanding the province's agri-food sector in the north as an opportunity to increase the production of local food. However, there has been little attention to the lack of necessary services for producers, as access to routine and emergency veterinary service is essential. The research has followed 4 key objectives. The first is to assess the current and potential veterinary service capacity in rural regions of Ontario, focused on the north, to determine real and perceived social and economic barriers to growth among veterinary practices, to assess the current and potential future need for veterinary services among livestock producers, and lastly, to provide recommendations for municipalities, veterinarians, the province, and academia to overcome barriers. 6 main methods of data collection have been employed throughout the duration of the project to achieve the research objectives. These include a jurisdictional scan, which provided an inventory of current programs and strategies that aim to attract and retain veterinary professionals to rural and remote communities. Interviews with producers, veterinarians, and other stakeholder groups, including government ministries, commodity groups, farmer organizations, and veterinary associations, to better understand current programs and needs. A survey of veterinarians and producers across rural regions of the province. Focus groups with current students from the Ontario Veterinary College to help understand factors that might attract or discourage them to pursue large animal practice in Northern Ontario, and mapping data to identify the service areas of rural veterinarians and the location of rural farms to help identify gaps in service. Now that I have discussed some of the background information on the project, I'm going to highlight some of the key findings from the research. We will take a quick look at some of the perspectives that were shared by the interviewed groups of producers, veterinarians, and students from the Ontario Veterinary College in the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine program. The first stakeholder group that I will talk about are producers. Overall, the producers that we interviewed expressed that their access to veterinarians was generally limited, and even if they had veterinary coverage at the moment, emergency care services were not accessible to all producers. Along with this came concerns from producers with the inability to access drugs without an existing veterinary client-patient relationship. Producers also expressed their concern that academia is not adequately promoting the North as an option to students, and that current veterinary students are not properly prepared to work with food animals. During the interviews with veterinarians, they expressed concerns over the high demands of their job and the conditions of working in rural regions, including long working hours, regular commutes of an hour or more, and their inability to service all emergency clients. The veterinarians also expressed how essential the veterinary assistance program is to their large animal operations. However, with a limit on travel compensation, it is often not enough when having to travel upwards of an hour to access each client. And lastly, similarly to producers, current veterinarians expressed that they are concerned that with upcoming retirements, there will be no one to fill the positions, as it seems that new graduates are increasingly uninterested in large animal veterinary medicine. Through the focus groups, students expressed concerns that the opportunity to become confident with large animals and work with food animal producers to build connections is not provided through the OVC program. Many students expressed that if there are more opportunities to engage with large animals earlier on in the program, it may help to entice students into the large animal stream. And lastly, students expressed that funding, including scholarships and debt forgiveness, could be a good motivator for working in rural areas, as well as increasing bonuses and housing opportunities for Northern Ontario externships. I chose to go into a little bit more detail here about the focus groups, just because within the interviews, the majority of producers and veterinarians expressed concerns over the inability of the current OVC program to produce large animal veterinarians who are willing to work in rural areas. This is also very important to consider, as the opinions of current OVC students are important, as they will become the next generation of veterinarians capable of providing this care in rural and remote regions. To convey the results of these focus groups, I have selected 6 student quotes that I feel represent some of the main issues that were brought forward by the students. There is a lot of great theoretical large knowledge taught at OVC, but we are not given the tools to actually practice large animal veterinary. A mentor prior to school mentioned that OVC won't prep you for becoming a food animal vet. She explained to me that I would have to take on the opportunity to learn more about large animals and look for outside experience. More mentorship during the live animal labs would be more helpful. We tend to just stand around and read our paper, which is not very useful. In second year, there is one chance to handle sheep, and this is the only time you actually work with small ruminants. There is a bias that if you did not grow up with equine or large animal, you will not be respected. And finally, growing up on the farm meant dairy was a big pull for me. I have a relatability factor because I come from a farming background. These statements from the students that we interviewed help to convey reasons for choosing their areas of specialization, how the veterinary program influenced their decision, and recommendations of changes that could be made to the program to better support students interested in large animal practice. Shifting gears a little, I'm now going to talk about some of the key findings that the research team has shared through our final report and the key takeaways of this research project. So with the research project wrapping up completion, the research team has recently published 2 reports that are now available to the public. The jurisdictional scan, which provides information about the various programs and strategies that are used to attract and retain veterinary and medical professionals to rural regions in Ontario and Canada, as well as worldwide. And these can be used as precedents during the research, just to show other programs that are used currently. And the final report, which provides an overview of the project and provides recommended solutions and roles for each of the project stakeholder groups, which include the government, producer and producer organizations, veterinarians and veterinary organizations, and academia. The following are some of the key roles and recommendations for each of the stakeholder groups that are highlighted within the final report. So for the government, it is essential that Northern specific funding programs for veterinarians, such as the Veterinary Assistant Program, are reviewed to ensure that reimbursements and other financial supports are enough to assist large animal veterinarians in rural Ontario with travel and high operational costs. The government should also consider increasing the funding that is provided for student externships in Northern Ontario to promote the North to current students and increase the likelihood that students will seek employment in rural regions. For academia, recommendations include a review of current student recruitment strategies, focusing on recruiting more students from northern and rural regions to the DVM program, as well as assessing the effectiveness of large animal programming within the OVC's curriculum and increasing the exposure to large animals and rural food animal operations earlier on in the program. For veterinarians and veterinary organizations, the CVO should continue their work on the issue of veterinary attraction and retention with their task force, as well as explore opportunities to increase the use of registered veterinary technicians within the large animal veterinary sector in rural and remote regions of the province. And finally, for northern municipalities, it is recommended that they explore municipally guided attraction and retention strategies for new veterinarians graduating from the DVM program, as well as improve attraction and retention strategies for new immigrants. As no single organization owns this problem, collaboratively developing a series of actions that can be championed by different groups will be key. There are 4 main takeaways from this research. The first is that there is increasing need for large animal veterinarians in rural Ontario, particularly in the north, as existing vets retire and farmers migrate north. Second is that it is clear that the retention of large animal veterinarians is particularly difficult in remote and northern regions of Ontario due to a number of reasons, including long working hours, unfavorable working conditions, a lack of surrounding amenities, a lack of jobs for family members, and a lack of confidence in new graduated veterinarians. Third, many veterinary students feel ill-prepared to work with large animals due to a lack of training through the DVM program, creating a lack of familiarity. And finally, solutions to veterinary attraction and retention should focus on multiple methods, including educational, financial, regulatory, personal, and professional approaches, as demonstrated within the jurisdictional scan. Following the publication of the project's final report and the jurisdictional scan, we will be working on distributing the results of the project to the public and project stakeholders. We are also currently working on creating a set of toolkits that will provide specific information on the roles, responsibilities, and recommendations for each specific stakeholder group. These stakeholder groups include the government, academia, veterinarians and veterinary organizations, and northern municipalities. Before I finish my presentation, I would like to thank the Agri-Food Innovation Alliance for funding this project, as well as the project participants and stakeholders. Thank you for listening to the presentation, and please feel free to contact myself or Sarah for any more information about the project, and I will now take questions.